What's up? What's up? What's up? What's up? It's been a minute. It's been a minute since I have been on. But here I am. Let me send something over to myself. But yeah, it's been a long time since I've been out. But here I am. So what's up? What's good? Today I'm going to be talking very quickly about passive aggressive traits that shown up for some of us, some of you, while you are dating an individual. I, I say, may covert, passive aggressive narc. So many of you have come to me and have asked me about narcissism. Since I do talk about relationships, I talk about love, I talk about dating. Um, Excuse me, and you have shared your experiences, and some of you know that I have had my bouts with narcs. And also, I used to talk about that experience and different experiences, like with my mother and things like that, who were, she also was very narcissistic and very controlling, borderline personality, and so on and so forth. And it was very challenging as a child growing up with a parent like that. But I also found myself in relationships, unfortunately, with a few that, because of my demeanor of niceness and kindness and nurturing and understanding and empathy and all the things, I have found myself in several relationships in some capacity with an individual or individuals that they too were very much so narcissistic. Now, listen, I'll be the first to tell you we all have narcissism, some level, some measure of it within us. So I don't want to come on here and make it seem like we're better than them or they're so much worse than us. But I will say that when you one understand that we all have a level of narcissism, right? We can all see ourselves in some of the traits that I may speak on or that I will speak on. We're not all of those things. We may see ourselves in one and two, or there is a level of, I think, selfishness that comes with a lot of us, right? Just everyday living. If you're trying to advance, or if you're entrepreneur, if you're trying to, survive, or push your children to be the best. I mean, there is a level of confidence, right? That you have to express and show. There is a measure of selfishness that you have to have whenever you're trying to keep a little something for yourself. So to those people, to you, I am not talking to you. This is not a hit on you, right? It's not a hit on those of us that are maybe at a point in our lives where we're saying, you know what, forget it. I am doing this for me no matter what. So this is not that. Um, This is for those that have found themselves in relationships with individuals who are absolutely selfish and who try to triangulate or gaslight them or try to make them feel like something's wrong with them or the crazy making or just experiences that you're just not certain you just can't put your finger on. So today I'm talking about the nice guy. And again, it could be the nice girl. So it depends on who you are, where you're sitting, who you're dating. This could also be the nice girl. But I'm specifically talking about the nice guy because I created this video for a woman who was dating the nice guy. And she dated the nice guy for about 4.5 years. And she could not put her finger on what wasn't quite right because of all the different subtleties that she experienced. But one thing that she did tell me was she began to become ill, and ill in interactions with the nice guy, ill in just everyday goings and comings. And I shared with her just before agreeing to do this video that the body keeps score. And I too dealt with that, dealt with feeling ill around a narcissist, my stomach, my head, I just felt did not feel like myself. So, um, to those of you that are in relationships with anyone, and maybe you have not labeled them, maybe you have not titled them, maybe you have decided like, oh, I'm not, I'm not a therapist. I'm not going to put, just put that on someone. And, I get it. But without labeling, let's just talk about what you may be experiencing. So, to the person that's dating the nice guy, but the nice guy doesn't always seem so nice. When others are not looking, the nice guy seems like a terror, or the nice guy just seems a little bit off. Um, to the person that has gone through this, my heart goes out to you. To the persons that are dealing with this, and maybe through this conversation, will discover that you yourself um, could be dealing with a narcissist and you don't know how to get out of it, then I encourage you currently, right now, as you're listening, before I even start in my list, sharing my list, go ahead and contact the counselor and find a counselor that has experience or a therapist that has experience in helping those that have been victimized by narcissistic personalities or manipulative personalities. Find someone that has that proven experience and has a coaching circle because I promise you, you're going to need it once you begin to discover what you're in. You're going to need all the help that you possibly get. All right, so I'm going to just call out a few signs that you may be with a narcissist that just so happens to be passive aggressive, and also they're subtle and covert. There's a lot of information out there. You'll see a lot of these symptoms and signs show up on a ton of videos. I've created a compilation of things that I myself personally have endured and experienced, and others have as well. I just felt that these would be more helpful because these signs to me are more obvious once you know, right? So, one of the first ones is the person oftentimes shows up non cooperative or procrastinates. Um, Now, sure, this can be in any of us, but add this on to everything else I'm going to tell you and go back and think about the first one that I'm sharing with you. No matter what you're trying to plan, no matter what you're doing, you find yourself constantly bumping heads, can't agree with anything. Or if they do decide that they're going to help, going to show up, they're procrastinating, they're late, they're, like, oh, yeah, I was going to do that. Even when it comes to themselves, I dated a person that always talked about working out, always talk about eating right. Just constantly, because they knew that that's what I was into. And so they would constantly forward what they were going to do, what we were going to do on me all the time. And none of it would happen. And I would get so frustrated, especially early on in the relationship. And you may find yourself doing this as well. Early in the relationship, you're getting frustrated because you realize everything that the person tell you that you're going to do, it doesn't happen, or maybe they will derail the plan. Like, oh, we're gonna go out we're gonna go have a picnic, and suddenly they'll derail the plan, and something else takes precedence that really didn't have to, but because again, you're nurturing, you're understanding, you're accommodating, you're like, okay, okay, okay. So now you're putting off what you really wanted to accommodate this person in their folly and in their bullcrap, right? So number two, they forget that they offered to help or they show up sloppy, is what I say. So, you have made a plan. They're supposed to help, supposed to show up. I did an ex that would show up drunk no matter what. And I'm like, you said that we were going to do this. Why'd you show up this way? It would become very weird, excuse me, very uncomfortable for me. And then again, with the person that's very understanding, you will begin to be like, all right, well, at least they showed up. So now you start to rationalize and settle. At least they showed up, regardless of how they showed up. But that's just not a good way to do it because when you start again shifting your boundary, they'll continue. They'll continue to kind of like keep like overriding until the relationship become what they want only, and you have totally lost yourself. So number three, they forget that they were to talk. Okay, so they'll tell you that they're supposed to talk about something with you, right? And they'll forget that they even said they want to talk about the issue. So here's a perfect example. With a narc, whether they're covert, overt, benign, malignant, whatever it is, if there's something they have agreed to talk to you about, especially if it's something you brought up, like, hey, babe, yeah, I want to make sure we talk about that later on. and they're not comfortable. They don't really want to talk about it because they don't even want that closeness. They don't want that connection. First of all, they'll try to avoid it at all costs. Well, they'll try to make sure that you have this conversation in certain parameters. You can't talk about it before they go to work. You can't talk about it before they go to bed. You can't talk about it on lunch break. You can't talk about it before an event. You can't talk. So now you're like trying to find the space to talk about it, and now you've agreed, and they'll forget to even promise you that you're going to talk about it. They'll look at you like you're like they're perplexed, like what? I don't rem and now it's an aggravation because now they have to stop all these very important things that they have placed precedence on. Now they'll be like, well, all right, I guess we can talk about it. So now you may start feeling guilty because you feel like you're being like an inconvenience to them. So be careful, be mindful. Number four, they'll manipulate through loaded questions and or statements like telling you what to do or shaming you. Perfect example for me personally. Um, I was dating someone, and it seems like everything I used, everything I bought, um, they knew something better. Well, um, if you want, you could use this particular protein, but then I'm like, well, I have beans, I have this, I have that for my protein. But then they'll be like, well, have you ever tried, you haven't tried X amount, X fuel, or you haven't tried this particular brand, or you're sitting there like, well, no, I used to be accommodating. I used to be like, oh, no, I haven't. I mean, I guess I could try it. And then I realized, like, I'm like, wait a minute, what? I actually like what the hell I was using. Why do I need to use that? Or if, let's say, another perfect example, because it could be subtle, or, again, I'm talking about the covert narc, so they can be very subtle. Um, but I remember purchasing like food containers that you do food prep in, right? And I don't need a lot, right? And as it relates to, certain brands of items, I'm not a name brand person, so I don't care. Is it functional? No matter which ones I bought, or what I already had before I started dating this person, they would go out and get better ones. And then they would say things like, well, did you try those? Like, did you see the ones I put up there? And I'm like, yeah, but I'm using these. Again, this may not look on the surface like it's a problem until you begin to add all the other things together. And now you're like, okay, wait, what I'm using is good enough, right? Like, I think it's good enough. So, what's the problem? Everything for me, in my experience, almost everything I use. I mean, if it was earbuds, they will go buy me a better pair of earbuds. Um, for instance, and I'll just use this as an example. This is like a camera tool. It's a tracking tool, right? If I bought this one, which I think is great, they will go buy a different one and tell me it was better. So, so this is kind of the subtle ways of manipulation that they will use. Sometimes it can come in the form of questions and statements. Sometimes it can come in the form of them pushing what they feel is best on you. Um, I got so many examples of that subtle manipulation of what they feel, what they do and feel is best. I have so many of those examples because I dealt with it constantly, and I would always push back, like, I'm my own person, right? So another one, number five, playing the victim role. Oftentimes in with a covert narcissist, again, they're very subtle. So they may come to you, you may meet them, and they're like, yeah, my ex was one of them said my ex was a narc. And I'm like, oh, okay. I understood what narcissist abuse was, but I could not see any of like the residual effects in that person. Because in truth, if you've been in an abusive relationship, I personally believe, and I personally have seen, many of us have the same residual effect, especially if you've just gotten out that relationship. But I noticed that with this particular person, they had none of that, none of the residual. It was just like, yeah, I got rid of them and I'm good. Like, but you were with him for 5 years and there's no residual. That was a red flag for me. And as the time went on and the years went on, I watched this person. I realized that it wasn't the ex that was the narcissist. Same thing with the individual that asked me to create this video. Very similar. They themselves met a person and they talked about their spouse was didn't have any motivation, didn't have their own identity, didn't do anything for themselves, totally was dependent upon them. And after 25 years of marriage, they were just exhausted and tired and this and that and blah, 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 blah. Well, in the relationship, that showed up to not be true. Everything that they complained about their ex-spouse was, they showed up in her relationship, and their relationship the exact same way. That was exactly who they were. Did not have their own identity, was trying to find themselves everywhere and in everything, had very low motivation, always was just kind of like complaining and down in the dumps and sick and woe is me and a victim. So you have to be careful when people are constantly in the victim role. You do want to, have empathy and be compassionate, but you want to really, really see exactly what that looks like and what part did they play and see if there is any accountability, because oftentimes there is no accountability in any part that they play. I asked one of my exes one time, and this is kind of a sidebar, but I said to them again, there's certain things that you listen to. I remember saying, "Do you have any toxic behaviors? Like, what is your toxic trait?" I said, "Because this is mine." I gave up solo what my toxic trait was, and they answered, "Oh, I don't have any." They could not find a toxic trait. That is a huge red flag. When a person feels like, "No, I just don't have any toxic traits," and has to be, right? All right, let's move forward. So number six, a smear campaign or triangulation between people on the outside or their friends. They will not address conflict head on. I have noticed this, like I said, the victim role, right? And then there's the smear campaign. And that may look like they're a victim at work. There's a reason why they were skipped over for promotions, or they were not looked at like other people for opportunities. They may complain about everyone at work, all these bad things and traits, and people not knowing what they're doing, and they of course could do it way better. But they themselves are constantly being looked over, or that may show up as they're not really, or sounding and acting like they don't really have any real connections or any real call any real like coworkers that they really like jive with at work. Lying, because if you give it some time, if you just give it a little bit of time, you'll notice that they'll also turn right around. And when they don't, where they don't have any colleagues at work that they jive with, suddenly when they're on the outs with you, they'll be going to lunch and be going to breakfast and be meeting for Bible study groups at work with these same people. So be very mindful when people should talk to you about the work relationships and them being constantly overlooked. Um, at their job. But another way they can do that is like with friends. So they can start a smear campaign. You got an issue with them. They're acting like, they're avoiding conversations with you, and or they're trying to act like everything's okay, or they're acting like, oh, I just don't know what to, say. Well, they'll go to their friends and they'll go over there and make you look horrible, make themselves look like a victim and look like they're trying to be accommodating, but you're just intolerable, non-cooperative, so on and so forth. So they will paint pictures of you like something's wrong with you, and then have you around their friends, and their friends are looking at you like you're crazy. So be very mindful. And I know that that's hard sometimes when you find yourself in this, because you start feeling like everybody is talking about you or treating you indifferent or whatever. So I can't even advise you to stay the course. That's not what my advice is going to be. My advice is going to be to know that it's happening, be okay with it happening, and plan your exit. That's my truth. I'm not one to tell you to stay in these relationships. I'm just not. Um, but the triangulation can also happen. I had an incident once for me personally. There was someone I was dating, the same someone, yummy coffee. Someone I was dating, and we had had a falling out argument, and of course they took no accountability. They were not responsible for anything. It was all me, but I took that. But we wound up at an event together, and I their phone went off, and we're just right together. So the phone goes off, and I just kind of glance over at them, and the phone is up, and I see my picture. I see my picture in their group message, in that person's friend's group message, right? And I'm like, why is my picture they the friends knew I've been dating that person for for over a year, 2 years. And I was like, why is my picture in that message? What is that all about? And he was just like, oh, I don't know what it is. I don't know. And I'm like, well, let's look at it. I'm not going to look at it. What do you? So he gaslit me. And they triangulated me into this mindset of your friends have my picture in your group message. Why? Why am I in your group message? You're sitting here with me. We're still going out. What is, these are friends that I saw all the time too. So imagine how I felt. I was furious about the game that he was playing when I was asking him, well, what's the conversation about? Who's talking about me and why? What did I do? And I knew what it was because I could see that it was actually a post that I put on Instagram. And I said, why is my Instagram post in your group message? Like, why? I didn't get it. I wasn't in the group message, right? So be careful when these things happen because you can get the smear campaign can start as soon as you have an argument or have a falling out, or as soon as they have a narcissistic injury, the smear campaign can start because they're going to play the victim. They will try to triangulate you. They will gaslight you. Their friends will be like flying monkeys. I mean, I know I'm using all these terms. Look them up. But I'm telling you, it can happen. To be prepared. Number seven, backhanded compliments, so subtle changes of plans, clothes. I talked about this earlier, but those backhanded compliments, can bring a lot of doubt and it can mess with your self-esteem. So if you're experiencing this in addition to all these other things or some resemblance of these other things, know that you are probably dating a covert narc. I'm not talking about the overt one. We see those coming a mile away. I'm talking about the covert, subtle, nice guy. So the nice guy can have a very slight backhanded compliment that can make you feel a little awkward. You can think it's great, and then when you analyze it long enough, you're like, something wrong with my glasses. He bought me new glasses because I like my glasses. Yeah, but they're not name brand. Or yeah, I mean they're nice, but they're like 2023. And you're like, well, you met me in 2022. But just be mindful that these things can come up and they're backhanded and they're sly makeup, clothing, hair, kind of like comparing you to other people very subtly, um, making you feel a little bit insecure about yourself where you was fine and secure before. So, excuse me, if you find yourself in those situations, know this, you just might be dating a passively aggressive covert narcissist. All right. Number eight, this is a big one, excluding you from events and gatherings. So, to the person that asked me to do this video, this was how we actually started the conversation. We was talking about having a partner that you actually live with, but you're constantly excluded from events and gatherings. First of all, it's a slap in the face. That's my own personal opinion. But when you find yourself dating someone and it's all about them. There's so many things I could say in this conversation, but let's just say it's all about them. And you find that where you're trying to have inclusivity, you're trying to have stability, you're trying to have a sense of norm, you're trying to have like just a routine, just so that you can become comfortable and secure, especially when you're living together. But this person continues to like last minute telling you plans. Um, oh, it's a guys only event, or oh, you have to be a part of this group, or it's just for the people at work, or it's just for the people that belong to this club, and you're like, what, I mean, is there anything that we can do together? Where it's a gathering and it's not just because sometimes they like to isolate. So you'll go out to dinner and you think you're good, but it's just you and dinner, right? So you want something where it's like, because you'll see them get up and they want to go hang out with the group. They want to go have a good time with the group. They want to take flights and trips and all these things with groups. But with you, suddenly either you can't afford it, or it's at a time where they know that your schedule will not permit, or they'll pretend it's all one particular group of people, or they'll make it seem a little bit distasteful and you're not interested. Got to be careful with that because I'm telling you, it's a game, a subtle game. All right. So, and then roll right on into number nine. They ignore you and act innocent. So now let's say you are upset because you've been feeling excluded for several times. And every now and again, they'll just decide they're going to go take you to dinner because that's supposed to satisfy your craving for connection. And then when they come back, or whenever you come back from that, you realize that they had a bigger plan for themselves where they're going on, let's say, a trip to Vegas with four of their homeboys. And you just found out today, and it's happening in 2 weeks. Oh, because it's an event that somebody else is having. So that's why they didn't invite you. It's an event that someone else is having, and they just so happen to be a part of it because now they got to do. So you're sitting there all torn up and not feeling good, right? They will ignore your complaint and they will act innocent. Babe, I don't know what's wrong. I mean, I got to go out here. You don't even like those events, or, well, so and so is going to be there, or I won't even have a lot. I'm just going to make a quick run and I'll be right back. No. All right. Number 10, they're critical with the more high ground act. I have experienced this as well. I remember like there were certain things that I would say, like just jokingly, like, yeah, because I'll do XYZ. And my ex would be like, what? That's so messed up. Like, why would you date other people if you already have someone in your life? Wow. While they themselves may be married, right? Going through a separation, left their spouse um, in total turmoil because they were a narcissistic tyrant. But they'll sit and act like, oh, I would never do that to someone because you're talking about it, right? Or maybe a friend of yours has done something that may be a little bit questionable. They suddenly will act like, oh, I would never do that. And they're like, what? You and your spirit saying you would do worse, that and then some. But of course, you being nice and empathetic and sweet and nurturing, you're not gonna really say it, but it's all your spirit. Yeah, yeah, there's so many things I can say about that bull crap. All right. Let's see. Oh, number 11. I kind of hit on this earlier, but the silent treatment, the avoidance. I remember I was dating the same someone, and I used to say, wow, he's so avoidant. It wasn't that at all. It was a silent treatment that was used. Because I did not want to label him as a narcissist, I would say he was avoidant, but the truth is that it was a silent treatment. But I'm telling you, there are times that the silent treatment can also look like ghosting. They'll pace the interaction between you and themselves, lack of communication. Remember, I said earlier, they'll decide for you when it's the best time to talk, right? Because they're kind of avoiding. So this is the same thing. They'll pace the conversation or pace the interaction where you had full access to them all this time. Suddenly they're pacing it. Now you have limited access. They're so busy. They're so busy with work. They're focusing on school. I mean, just all this stuff suddenly will like pop up. They'll switch it up on you. You're like, you were, we were just, how is it now you're so broke? Now you got to be at work at 8 o'clock on the dot. You ain't been with you 5 years. You ain't never been to work at 8 o'clock on the dot. That's never, but suddenly now, when you need to talk, suddenly now when there's an issue, suddenly now when they truly are needed, something else is more important. Something else is way more important. And it ain't you, and it's definitely not this conversation that we need to tackle or these issues that we need to confront. No. Lastly, Mr. Nice Guy, know that they will act very nice while still having contempt. This came to me in the form of I had gone on a trip with this person. And I'd experienced some things on that trip that, again, I felt very uncomfortable about, but I dealt with it, no problem. When we returned, almost a year later, I discovered that while on the trip, they were dissatisfied with the way I decorated the table. They were dissatisfied with the way I didn't include them in decorating the space the night that we were to host. I'm talking about a year later. So they held this in, played nice, acted like, oh, the trip was great, talked to everybody for a year. We had such a wonderful time. Now, that was not my story, but that was their story, and I just let them have it. But I did not find out until we were in the middle of a conversation about, listen, what do you need from me? How can, this is me talking to them. How can I best support you? Like, what do you want? Because I need this. Tell me what you need. Well, I needed you to respect the fact that I understood logistics or to respect the fact that I understood decorating. And I'm like, what? Oh, yeah. Whenever we were on a trip in this particular country, whenever we had our event, you didn't even acknowledge the fact. And I was just floored. Like, what? So I said, it was almost a year ago. You held it in almost, yeah. Petty. Did I say they were petty? Okay. You're petty. All right. Okay, so lastly, well, that was my number 12. But listen, let me say this. If you want to confront them when you realize that this is going on, don't. Go find yourself a rock or a wall and talk to it because I promise you'll get more out of that conversation than you will out of theirs. You're going to feel horrible and real shitty if you talk to them. I'm telling you, especially if you say, I know what you are. I know what you are. No, it's a waste. It's a waste, and it's going to burn you completely out. Um, know that you cannot reform them. Um, they have no accountability to anything. And if they do pretend that they're like, okay, 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 you'll know that it's not authentic. It's empty, and it really doesn't mean much. So do not hang on to them for dear life. Do not hang on to them thinking that they're going to say something to make this all better for you. That is not it. They're going to gaslight you. They're going to give you just enough. They're going to give you just enough to hold you on until they can find some new supply. You don't have to do all that. So please don't bother. Just figure out what you want to do with yourself. Like, is this the life you want? It will never change. They will never change. A covert, anything art, they will never. I know people are going to hear this and you're religious and you're prayerful and you believe. I'm telling you what God loves, the truth. These individuals do not change. They don't. They do. So if you move through your life, understanding and accepting God, and if you give up the fantasy that what you had was real and shared on both parts equally, then you make it move on. But a passive aggressive covert narc who's subtle and is the nice guy will always have you feeling crazy and overwhelmed and exhausted and confused. If that's what you want for your life, then have at it. If you want something different, seek therapy. Find your way out of there. You deserve better. It's your girl, Queenie Love. I hope this helps. Take care.